Victor Kane and Arben Leka clashed in a deadly battle for control of Liverpool, where loyalty was a lie, betrayal was deadly, and every street ran red with blood. Please subscribe for daily new update of gang crime story and watch till end. Liverpool's docks had always been a place of movement and shadow, where ships carried both legal cargo and secrets no one dared to speak about. On a cold evening, the mist rolled in from the Mersey, curling around the cranes and warehouses like a ghostly warning. The city's locals went about their routines, unaware that a storm was quietly approaching. From across the Atlantic, Victor Kane, a feared figure in the American Mafia, stepped onto the dock, his presence alone commanding attention. He was a man of sharp suits, sharper eyes, and a reputation that preceded him. One built on ruthless efficiency and the kind of violence that left enemies whispering for years afterward. Victor's plan was clear: establish a strong foothold in Liverpool and control its underworld operations, particularly the lucrative drug routes connecting Europe and America. Yet Victor was not the only predator in the city. Across town, Arben Leka and his Albanian crime syndicate had already carved out territory with quiet precision. Their influence was subtle but pervasive. A shadow network of enforcers, informants, and corrupt officials kept their operations invisible to most. Arben, a man with piercing eyes and a mind for strategy, had no intention of letting outsiders claim what he and his men had built. His reputation for cunning and ruthless retribution was known even beyond the city's borders. As Victor's men unloaded their cargo and scouted potential operations, the tension between the two groups began to thicken like fog over the water. Observers might have thought the city was peaceful, but in the hidden corners, whispers of a looming war circulated. Each side monitored the other, analyzing movements, testing loyalties, and preparing for inevitable confrontation. The docks, usually a place of commerce, had become a stage for an unspoken challenge, a silent warning to all who crossed paths with either group. Victor walked among his men, inspecting the surroundings with a hawk-like focus. Every detail mattered: where the streetlights cast shadows, where a sudden noise might reveal an ambush, how the locals might react to strangers moving through their neighborhoods. He could sense the tension building, like electricity before a storm, and he knew that patience would be critical. One wrong move could turn the city into a battleground overnight. Meanwhile, Arben observed from the shadows, blending seamlessly into the cityscape. His eyes followed the newcomers' movements, noting their strengths, weaknesses, and possible vulnerabilities. He understood that underestimating Victor Kane would be a fatal mistake. Yet he also knew that Liverpool's streets were his home ground. Every alley, every warehouse, and every abandoned building was a potential weapon in his hands. The Albanian syndicate had survived by being invisible until the right moment, and Arben intended to maintain that advantage. As night deepened and the fog thickened, the stage was set. Two powerful forces, separated by oceans yet connected by ambition and greed, were now in Liverpool. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first spark that would ignite a conflict no one could contain. Neither side could afford hesitation, and neither could predict the devastating consequences that were about to unfold. The night air over Liverpool was thick with tension, the kind that made even seasoned dockworkers quicken their pace and glance over their shoulders. In a dimly lit street near the old waterfront, the Albanians were already moving. Arben Leka had planned this meticulously. His men knew every corner, every shortcut, and every shadow where danger could hide. Their target was an American-run nightclub near the docks, a hub for Victor Kane's operations and a symbol of his growing influence. It was a place where deals were made in whispered tones, where trust was as fragile as the glass bottles lining the bar. Tonight that fragile world would shatter. Masked figures slipped through the mist, carrying weapons and the silent promise of chaos. They moved like shadows themselves, barely making a sound as they approached the club. Inside, Victor's men were celebrating small victories, unaware that the storm was about to hit. Lucas Marino, Victor's lieutenant, had grown uneasy in recent days. The tension in the air was almost tangible, and even he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, the night exploded. Albanians burst through the doors and windows, guns firing, bottles shattering, and screams piercing the music and laughter that had filled the nightclub just moments before. Chaos erupted as men scrambled for cover, overturning tables and chairs in desperate attempts to escape the crossfire. The Americans fought back fiercely, returning fire and trying to protect both themselves and their operation. The sounds of gunshots echoed off the brick walls of the surrounding buildings, carrying over the empty streets and into the night sky, announcing to all that the underworld of Liverpool was no longer quiet. Victor, immediately assessing the situation, moved with calculated precision. He barked orders, directing his men to defensive positions, while trying to anticipate the Albanians' movements. The fight spilled onto the streets, where shadows twisted and collided under the glow of streetlights. Civilians ran, some hiding behind parked cars, others pressing themselves against the walls, hoping not to be seen. For a few terrifying moments, the city felt like it belonged neither to the living nor to the dead, but to the violence that had been unleashed. By the time the gunfire ceased, the nightclub was in ruins. Windows were shattered, walls scorched, and furniture splintered beyond recognition. Both sides had suffered losses, but neither had retreated completely. Victor realized the Albanians were more than just local thugs. They were disciplined, organized, and unafraid. The attack had been precise, calculated, and merciless. Every surviving member of his team felt the weight of this realization, the creeping understanding that their lives and ambitions in Liverpool were now intertwined with a deadly rival. Arben Leka, observing from the shadows outside, allowed a rare smile to cross his face. The message had been sent. The Americans had arrived, but they had not yet conquered. The Albanians' presence was a warning, and the war for Liverpool streets had officially begun. Each side retreated into the night, wounded but unbroken, leaving the city to absorb the aftermath of the first clash, knowing that the bloodshed was only the beginning. Victor Kane's headquarters felt heavier than usual after the nightclub attack. The air inside was thick with smoke, tension, and whispered suspicions. Every face in the room carried a mix of fear and anger, a reflection of the violent night that had left both sides bloodied but unbowed. Victor paced slowly, his sharp eyes scanning his team, noting every twitch, every nervous glance. The Albanians had not only attacked them, they had humiliated them. The realization gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. Someone had betrayed them. It was Lucas Mourinho, Victor's lieutenant, who had begun to act strangely. Once loyal, Lucas now lingered in corners, hesitating before sharing crucial information, offering excuses that didn't add up. He started missing routine checks, misreporting deliveries, and asking unusual questions about schedules and routes. Victor's instincts screamed danger, but he needed proof before acting. One wrong move could destroy his operations completely, especially if the Albanians sensed his suspicion. Meanwhile, Lucas moved carefully, sending discreet messages to Arben Leka. He justified his betrayal to himself with personal debts and lingering grudges, convincing himself that survival sometimes demanded ruthless choices. Every intercepted shipment, every failed operation, was another step in the plan he had woven, silently undermining the Americans from within. Victor's empire was vulnerable, and Lucas knew it. He had become the invisible hand tipping the balance toward Arben's favor. Victor convened a secret meeting with his closest advisors, trying to rebuild a strategy that would protect their remaining power. Every map of Liverpool was scrutinized, every safe house analyzed, and every potential trap reconsidered. The tension within the group was palpable. No one spoke above a whisper, afraid that any careless comment might be overheard. Victor realized that Lucas's betrayal was not just a threat to their operations, it was a psychological weapon. Doubt had seeped into the minds of even the most loyal men, and the Americans were beginning to fracture from the inside. As days passed, shipments meant to strengthen Victor's control mysteriously disappeared or were destroyed. Men were ambushed in seemingly random streets, and information that should have remained secure reached the Albanians with chilling accuracy. Victor grew increasingly paranoid, inspecting every plan, every team member, and every route multiple times. He knew that patience and observation were his only tools against the unseen enemy within his own ranks. Each failure was a puzzle piece, and slowly the pattern of betrayal began to emerge. Lucas, meanwhile, maintained a facade of loyalty, attending meetings, giving advice and sharing reports. He smiled when Victor praised him, secretly savoring the knowledge that every bit of trust he earned was another step toward ruin. The Albanians used this information ruthlessly, striking with precision, always staying one step ahead. Liverpool had become a chessboard, and Victor realized that the next moves would determine not just control of the city, but survival itself. Victor could feel the walls closing in, the stakes rising with every intercepted shipment and every failed operation. The war was no longer just a battle for territory. It had become a struggle against betrayal, strategy, and the hidden motives of those closest to him. Lucas's treachery had turned what had once been a confident campaign into a tense, unpredictable fight, and the Americans knew that a single mistake now could be fatal. The city waited, unaware that within the shadows of loyalty and deceit, the first seeds of the next violent chapter were already taking root. The Liverpool docks had never felt so alive with danger. The night air was heavy with the smell of salt, diesel and smoke from a dozen small fires that had been left burning from previous skirmishes. Arben Leka had planned the ambush with painstaking precision. He knew the city, its streets and its docks better than anyone. His men moved like shadows across the warehouses, slipping silently between stacks of cargo crates and abandoned containers. Every corner was a potential killing ground, every alley a trap waiting to be sprung. The Americans had no idea that tonight, the docks themselves would become a battlefield. Victor Kane's men were expecting trouble, but even they could not predict the scale of what was coming. Lucas Marino had fed Arben key details about shipment times, security measures, and the routes Victor's team would take. When Victor's convoy arrived, carrying crates of weapons meant to strengthen their control over Liverpool, they were immediately surrounded. The Albanians attacked without warning, emerging from the shadows with rifles and handguns blazing. The sound of gunfire echoed over the water, bouncing off shipping containers and warehouses, creating a chaotic symphony of violence. Men screamed as bullets tore through crates and shattered glass. Some tried to fight back, returning fire from behind overturned barrels and vehicles. But the Albanians had anticipated every move. The Americans were caught off guard, their carefully orchestrated plans falling apart in seconds. Victor himself ducked behind a steel container, narrowly avoiding a hail of bullets. He could see the desperation on his men's faces, the confusion, and the fear that had begun to spread like a virus through the ranks. Arben, standing on a higher dock platform, surveyed the chaos with cold precision. His strategy was simple but effective: strike hard, strike fast, and leave a message. The Americans would remember tonight, and the Albanians would remind them that control over Liverpool was not something easily taken. The ambush was brutal, and it left the city's waterfront strewn with evidence of the bloodshed. Bodies, abandoned weapons, and overturned vehicles marked the area like a warning etched into the night. Victor's rage was barely contained as he regrouped his men. Every surviving operative was ordered to form defensive positions, securing the remaining crates and ensuring no further surprises. Yet the damage had been done. The Americans had lost men, weapons, and momentum. The docks, once a neutral ground for commerce, had become a symbol of their vulnerability. Victor realized that the Albanians were not merely rivals. They were a force capable of outthinking and outmaneuvering them at every turn. By dawn, the city streets were quiet, but the impact of the ambush lingered. Liverpool's residents avoided the waterfront, sensing the remnants of violence that had erupted overnight. Victor knew that the Albanians had sent a message. This was only the beginning. The war was escalating, and the stakes were higher than ever. Every move, every plan, and every decision would now carry the weight of life and death. The American Mafia had been humiliated, but Victor Kane's determination had only hardened. Revenge would come, and when it did, the city would once again tremble under the clash of two unstoppable forces. Victor Kane knew that brute force alone would not win this war. The Albanians had proven their cunning and ruthlessness, and any direct confrontation was likely to be costly. He needed a strategy that would cripple Arben Leka's organization without exposing his remaining men to further risk. After studying the patterns of Albanian movements, Victor identified a weakness: a small group of key lieutenants who orchestrated Arben's operations. If he could lure them into a trap, the balance of power in Liverpool could shift in his favor. The plan began with careful misinformation. Victor's team circulated rumors of a large arms deal that would take place near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the docks. The location was chosen for its isolation and multiple exit points, allowing Victor's men to control the environment completely. Every detail had to be precise: timings, vehicle routes, and the placement of hidden surveillance were all calculated down to the second. Lucas Marino, still secretly aiding Arben, unwittingly helped by providing critical information about which lieutenants would attend the deal. Victor's genius was turning betrayal into an advantage. As night fell, the warehouse sat silently, seemingly abandoned. Inside, Victor's men prepared for the arrival of the Albanians, checking weapons, setting up barricades and establishing escape routes. Victor walked among them, his calm demeanor hiding the storm of anticipation within him. Every second felt like an eternity, every shadow outside the warehouse a potential threat. When headlights appeared in the distance, the tension became almost unbearable. Arben's lieutenants arrived, confident in the intelligence they had received. They were armed, alert, and unaware of the trap waiting for them. As they entered the warehouse, Victor's team moved with precise coordination, sealing exits and positioning themselves to control every angle. The moment the lieutenants were inside, the ambush began. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the walls, sending crates and debris flying. The Albanians were skilled fighters, but the surprise was total, and Victor's men had the advantage of preparation. By the time the chaos subsided, several key lieutenants lay incapacitated or dead. The Albanians had been dealt a devastating blow, and Victor allowed himself a brief moment of grim satisfaction. Yet, he knew the war was far from over. Arben himself had not appeared, and his survival meant that the threat was still very real. The operation had sent a message. Victor Kane was not to be underestimated, and the Americans were capable of strategy, patience, and ruthless precision. The aftermath of the ambush left Liverpool tense. News of the explosion and gunfire spread quickly, though the details remained unclear to the public. Within the criminal underworld, whispers of Victor's cunning reached every corner. Meanwhile, Arben retreated into the shadows, reassessing his strategy and vowing that the Americans would pay for their audacity. Victor, on the other hand, returned to his headquarters, already planning the next steps. The city was far from peaceful, but for the first time since the arrival of the Americans, Victor had managed to seize the upper hand. The game of cat and mouse continued, and Liverpool's streets were once again a battlefield of shadows, secrets, and deadly ambition. Arben Leka had disappeared into the labyrinth of Liverpool's streets, but his mind was sharper than ever. The loss of his lieutenants at the warehouse ambush had been a blow, but not a defeat. He had survived, and survival meant planning a counterstrike that would remind Victor Kane and his men that the Albanians were far from broken. Arben's strategy was ruthless and methodical. He had always understood the city better than anyone, and now he would use it as a weapon. The Albanians regrouped in secret safe houses scattered throughout the city. Every alley, abandoned building, and underground passage became part of a network of movement and concealment. They studied the Americans' habits, tracking supply routes, observing safe houses, and identifying vulnerabilities in Victor's defenses. Arben's team was patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike with precision, and that moment arrived sooner than Victor anticipated. Late at night, the Albanians executed their plan. Small groups moved through the city like ghosts, emerging suddenly to ambush American patrols, intercept shipments, and sabotage communications. The streets became unpredictable and deadly. Victor's men, previously confident after their own ambush, now found themselves under constant threat. Every delivery, every movement was met with invisible eyes and hidden weapons. The Albanians struck quickly and vanished into the maze of Liverpool, leaving chaos and fear in their wake. Lucas Marino's betrayal became painfully clear during this counterattack. Victor discovered that sensitive information about safe houses and shipment schedules had leaked repeatedly, allowing Arben to anticipate every move. The knowledge that one of his own men had turned against him cut deep. Victor's anger was barely contained, but he understood that direct retaliation against Lucas would have to wait. The war demanded strategy, not rash vengeance. Arben's counterstrike culminated in a series of coordinated attacks on multiple American safe houses in a single night. Explosions shattered the quiet of Liverpool's neighborhoods, while gunfire echoed from abandoned buildings. Victor's men fought valiantly, but the Albanians' knowledge of the terrain and meticulous planning gave them a decisive advantage. Several key operatives were injured or captured, leaving Victor reeling. The Americans had underestimated Arben's resilience and cunning. By dawn, the city was littered with the remnants of the night's violence. Streets smelled of smoke and blood, and windows were shattered from the relentless attacks. Residents stayed inside, fearful of stepping out into a city that had turned into a battlefield. Arben's message was clear: he could strike anywhere, anytime, and no one was safe. Victor's empire was shaken, and the illusion of control he had briefly enjoyed after the warehouse ambush had evaporated like morning mist. Victor, exhausted and enraged, realized the war had escalated far beyond what he had imagined. The Albanians were not just a rival gang, they were a force capable of strategic, unpredictable, and devastating attacks. Every move now required caution, intelligence, and patience. Liverpool had become a deadly chessboard, and the next moves would determine who would survive and who would fall. The streets were tense, the air electric with anticipation, and both sides knew that the true climax of their violent struggle was yet to come. Victor Kane understood that the war with Arben Leka could not continue as a series of reactive skirmishes. The Albanians had proven they could strike anywhere, anytime, and the Americans could not afford another ambush. Every loss, every intercepted shipment, and every betrayal had brought him to a single conclusion: the war needed a decisive end. He devised a plan that was both daring and dangerous, a trap that would lure Arben into a situation from which there would be no escape. The stage was set at the Liverpool docks, a place familiar to both sides, yet isolated enough for a confrontation of this magnitude. Victor spread rumors of a massive arms deal, designed to tempt Arben into appearing personally. Every detail was meticulously calculated: the timing, the vehicles, the placement of his men, and even the apparent vulnerabilities of the operation. Lucas Marino, still an insider with divided loyalties, continued to feed Arben bits of intelligence, unaware that Victor had anticipated his treachery and used it to strengthen the trap. As night fell, the docks seemed eerily quiet, the fog rolling in over the water like a silent witness to the violence that was about to unfold. Victor's men positioned themselves strategically along the waterfront, behind crates, shipping containers, and abandoned warehouses. Every angle was covered, every potential escape route monitored. Victor's pulse was steady, his mind sharp. This was the culmination of weeks of planning, and he knew that success would not come without bloodshed. Arben arrived with a small group of trusted lieutenants, confident and alert, moving through the docks with the precision of men who had survived countless battles. Victor's men held their positions, waiting for the exact moment to strike. As the Albanians reached the designated area, the ambush was triggered. Gunfire erupted, echoing over the water and bouncing off metal walls. Crates exploded, sending splinters and debris into the night air. The Albanians reacted with the skill and ferocity that had kept them alive so far, but the trap's precision gave the Americans the upper hand. The battle quickly became chaotic. Both sides fought with desperation, every corner and shadow hiding danger. Arben had indicated a possible trap, and his men fought with cunning and agility, countering Victor's every move. The fight was a blur of movement, smoke and flashing gunfire. By the end, the docks were littered with casualties on both sides, bodies and shattered evidence of the confrontation. Despite Victor's planning, Arben himself managed to escape through a hidden passage he had discovered years ago, leaving a trail of chaos and uncertainty in his wake. Victor surveyed the aftermath, his mind racing with frustration and grim satisfaction. He had crippled much of the Albanian network. But the man at the center remained free. The city's waterfront, once a symbol of commerce and routine, had become a graveyard of ambition, a silent testament to the destructive power of revenge and strategy. The Americans had delivered a powerful message, yet the war was far from over. Arben's escape ensured that Liverpool would remain a city on edge, where every shadow could hide a deadly adversary and every street was part of an ongoing invisible war. The morning after the final confrontation at the docks brought a deceptive calm to Liverpool. The fog had lifted, revealing streets scarred by the previous night's violence, broken crates, shattered glass, and the remnants of fires that had burned until dawn. For the residents, the city seemed to breathe normally again, but beneath the surface, tension lingered like an invisible fog. The American and Albanian mafias had both suffered losses, and the balance of power had shifted in ways that no one outside their circles could fully understand. Victor Kane returned to his headquarters, weary yet determined. The losses had been significant, and the streets were no longer safe for unprepared men. He surveyed the damage, counting his remaining operatives, reassessing their strengths, and calculating the next steps. Victory had been partial. He had dealt a devastating blow to Arben Leka's lieutenants and crippled parts of the Albanian network, but the enemy himself remained free, a constant, unpredictable threat. Victor knew that complacency could be fatal, and he resolved to strengthen his position, reinforce loyalties, and tighten control over every corner of the city he now sought to dominate. Arben, on the other hand, had vanished into the labyrinth of Liverpool, blending into its shadows as he had so often done. His escape from the docks was not merely a retreat, it was a strategic withdrawal. From hidden safe houses and secret contacts, he watched the Americans regroup, analyzing their movements and planning for future retaliation. The Albanian mafia had been weakened, but Arben's mind was sharper than ever. He understood that patience was his greatest weapon, and the war was far from over. Every operation, every shipment, and every street now belonged to a deadly game of observation and strategy. Liverpool itself had been changed by the violence. The docks, once busy with trade, had become a reminder of the destruction that ambition and rivalry could bring. Residents whispered about shadows moving in the night, about unmarked cars and mysterious figures that seemed to watch from every corner. The city had become a silent battlefield, where every alley and abandoned building held the memory of gunfire, betrayal, and blood. People went about their lives cautiously, unaware of the ongoing war between the powerful forces that ruled its underworld. Victor and Arben had both sent messages to their networks. Victories had been won, losses endured, but neither side could afford recklessness. The Americans tightened their security, monitoring every move, while the Albanians continued to strike from hidden positions, unpredictable and lethal. It was a delicate balance of fear and respect, power and survival, that ensured Liverpool remained tense, restless, and uncertain. As weeks passed, life on the surface resumed its usual rhythm, but the shadows remained. Victor Kane knew that Arben could return at any time, and Arben knew the same about Victor. The city itself had become a chessboard, each side plotting moves and countermoves with deadly precision. In Liverpool's underworld, the bloodshed was not forgotten, the betrayals not forgiven, and the struggle for dominance continued quietly, invisibly, and dangerously. Though the city's streets appeared calm, those who understood its true nature knew the war had only paused, waiting for the next spark to ignite a conflict that could erupt again at any moment, leaving the shadows of American and Albanian crime looming over Liverpool indefinitely.